All right. Good morning, everybody. Hey, Betty. It's good to see your
Hey,
face on this Friday morning. How are
same to
you?
you. Happy it's Friday, as always.
Happy it's Friday. That's right. It's Friday. TGIF. Well, welcome everybody in the audience. Thanks so much for another Compliance Capers. We are going to be diving into another OIG work plan report that has been completed. So, our first session of the month, we talked about the background of the OIG work plan. Last week, we ended up talking about something near and dear to both of us, psychotherapy services. And today, I really wanted to talk about ophthalmology. I'm blind as a bat since I was like 5 years old, wore glasses forever until my parents allowed me to have contact lenses. I shared with you offline earlier that I had those semi-hard gas permeable contacts when they first came out for astigmatism because they didn't have soft way back in the day. And so I had to wear these little blue contacts. No, they did not change my eye color, but they were blue. And they were very hard. So the moment I would like just sort of touch my face, it would pop out. So I would lose many a gas permeable lens throughout high school. And then I could advance to the toric lenses that finally came out. But anyway, so ophthalmology is near and dear to me for sure, from a personal standpoint, because I see the ophthalmologist all the time, fix the prescription that I need, especially now with aging eyes. So contacts and readers, it's a mess.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, I have the soft ones, but I wasn't any better. Now I do those daily ones, so I don't have to
Yeah.
mess with the whole cleaning and doing and all that junk.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was first, when I always was putting them in backwards, and so you get
Yes.
in, and then you're
Out.
sitting,
Right.
you're starting to walk away, and all of a sudden your eyes are just watering, and you feel like I'm like, what is that? So yeah, that's where I had a problem. Is like I always would put them in backwards. So I like it now. The ones they're like just so floppy. So now I don't know if it matters which way I put them in, but I don't really have that issue anymore. So I'm very glad at the advances of our contact lenses. So, but yeah, I have my readers even because I'm supposed to have the bifocal
The
lenses,
bifocals.
but I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it.
I could neither.
So now I have nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other eye. So actually, my lenses
Same.
are two different prescriptions.
Yep.
And so it takes your brain. When I first got them,
Mm-hmm.
is that some people can't do it because their brain has trouble adjusting to like, hey, what's going on? But it took me, I don't know, a couple days, and my brain like clicked into it. And now it's perfectly fine. I don't even realize it's two different ones. So sometimes I'll like do this if I need to see something that's closer up, or
That's
this if I
right.
need to see, because my things are two different prescriptions. So I'll like close one eye or the other if I'm trying to look at something close or far, or wear my granny glasses over top over top of my contact lenses.
People, the struggle is real for
It
us.
is.
Okay. That's what we're trying to say. We struggle. And especially in the work we do, we read massive volumes of
Oh yeah.
documents, and
Oh
so
yeah.
we just get blinder day by
Yeah.
day, sadly. So we love our ophthalmologists. We love that they help us however they can, because we do have aging eyes and so many multiple issues in both of our eyes. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And we have, workarounds, like you said, for how we do things. I know I have plenty of workarounds that I have to do. And now with computers, I definitely can't see with just my contacts. I just can't. No matter how much they've tried to tweak my prescription, I'm like, I can't. And I can't put my hard old grandma specs on because I can't see. That particular prescription is different than my contacts, right? So anyway, we digress, but at least it's similar. It's on topic to our ophthalmology. This particular OIG report is different than the one we talked about last week, not only in specialty, but in terms of last week's conversation was national. It was across the board for psychotherapy claims that the OIG was looking at. This report that we wanted to talk about, again, the full report is not going to be closed until sometime in 2024, because again, there are multiple reports that are embedded within this OIG project, which is coming from, of course, like we stated the first week, from the Office of Audit Services. That's the particular department that's in charge of reviewing this one. So, you know, of course, this is coming from your state, near and dear to you.
Great
This
state
was
of Florida.
Great state of Florida, a particular practice there, and all of their claims and documentation that was reviewed. So, you know, let me put up a link here for the audience so you guys can pull this up at your leisure and take a look. But in general, this is for that report. I don't think I talked about it last week, but I'm going to give you the report number is A-09-19-03025 for an ophthalmology clinic in Florida, audit of Medicare payments for eye injections of Avastin, Eylea, and Lucentis. So, you know, this report, again, is as comprehensive as the one we talked about before. It's not as lengthy, but the information is still pertinent and applicable to practices like this. I know I've audited many in my career for these specific types of, you know, wet eye macular degeneration types of conditions for patient populations, right? Very specific conditions. And, you know, these types of practices, you know, have a certain way of seeing their patients between visits, from service to visit, from service visit to service visit, right? Their conditions are degenerating constantly. And so they need to take a look at both eyes. You know, so when I'm looking as an auditor, I understand when practices are documenting that they need to see the patient for the right eye as well, right? To make sure that the disease has not progressed into that eye, even if the injection happens to be for the left eye, where it is definitely evident to the ophthalmologist that the condition is happening right now. And this is why we need to treat them at this point in time with a injection. So, you know, throughout the report, if you happen to be an ophthalmologist or a coding specialist for these types of eye conditions, I think it's very clear when you read documentation from your providers as to the why they are doing things. But the OIG in this report also has an incredibly illuminating way of looking at the various service lines, right, Betty? And in this case, they had no problems with the injections themselves. No problems with the injections. It's for all of the other services that were included on that encounter with the injection.
Right. They in the CPT code, for those of y'all that are listening, if you do ophthalmology, I'm sure you know this one by heart, but this is for the intravitreal injections. So the CPT code they're talking about in this study that they're doing, the plan is a 67028, and it has 0 global days to it. So that's the thing to be thinking about, because one of the issues came up with E&Ms and modifier 25 in here. But there's a lot of other services when they're doing the injection that they also may be doing at the visit. So it's not unusual to see the 67028 and other services, which the OIG said, you know, they don't have a problem necessarily with the fact that there was more services on there. It's when they looked at the documentation, they weren't supporting some of the services, and they did take umbrage with some of the E&M visits too, that they did it. So in the appendix A of this report, it's on page 17 of the report, just for when you go look at it, it does list out specifically the services. So they looked at 100 services and they had 100 intravitreal injections and said every one of those was good. But they also had 99 injections of anesthesia, and we'll get to that in a second because that's the big thing here. 94 diagnostic imaging services, 77 extended ophthalmoscopies, 73 E&M services, 50 doses of Avastin, and 50 doses of Eylea. So, this problem with these guys wasn't with the injection code. It was with the other stuff that went with it that they found that they were doing an error.
Which is great, in my opinion, right? Because I've had to audit numerous types of practices like this where there was an issue with the injection and that particular J code for the drug, right? So in this particular Florida clinic's case, bravo, they followed First Coast Services. They did that portion very, very well. But it's the other stuff. And I made a face on air here when you said the 99 injections were done for anesthesia, right? Those of us in the audience will probably know that that's not a good thing, right? Anesthesia for a injection to the eye, that anesthesia is going to be bundled, included in that injection with that drug, right? That's already bundled into that service. And they did that 99 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
So, that I want you to read to the audience that particular blurb about the medical director and the biller, where they identified the issue.
Yes.
At some point.
Yeah, in the report, the OIG reports that that the injection of the lidocaine is bundled into the procedure, and it can't be reported separately because it was done by the physician that was doing the procedure. So when you're doing your own anesthesia, you've got the bundling issue. And then it says that the physician said that he didn't know that you couldn't bill it separately. So they were billing the 67028, and then they were billing the injection of the lidocaine with modifier 59 to unbundle it out of the NPCI edits, to bypass the edit. And so on page 10 of the report, if y'all go and look at this, it says the clinic did not have policies and procedures to ensure that injections of anesthesia drugs were not billed with intravitreal injections. So that's problem number one. So either they don't have a compliance program, or the compliance program doesn't have the right policies and procedures in it. Then they say, however, the clinic's biller stated that she stopped billing for injections of an anesthesia drug when she became aware that these injections were included in the payment for intravitreal injections. The medical director stated that the clinic stopped billing Medicare for anesthesia and drug injections in August or September of 2019. Which begs a whole nother question, right, Sonal?
Right. Oh my goodness, Betty. Wow. So, two different points that we want to make here. So, like we had said in another compliance capers, perhaps it was the one in January, I can't recall. We've done this so many times now, happily. The OIG will investigate, right? Their team of people can come and interview the practice. And they clearly put in black and white here that biller was interviewed. And you said it was a she, made her statement, right? And wow. And then secondly, they only identified it, the biller only identified it in August or September of 2019. So, yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem because what happens to everything that was done beforehand, right? Before that date, wow. So what?
My alarm bells when I was reading that, it was just like, oh no, as you look at it. And the thing that came to my mind, one, it bypassed me about the interview thing. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's very true. They can talk to anybody now.
Anybody.
And sometimes people don't, just like that last one we did where they had the questionnaire, right?
That's
They can
right.
do things like
They
that.
can do that. Yeah.
But what went off in my head was, okay, so did they not self-disclose this? So you know that you didn't get paid right, and you've been overbilling, and you stopped it, which is great. We appreciate that. But does that mean you just get to keep all that money you didn't deserve? They should have self-disclosed with an attorney's
With
help.
an attorney.
I mean,
This makes me sweat. Having this conversation makes me sweat. Like, it gives me stress, right? Like, because we don't know.
yeah,
But with that little sentence that she made, people like you and I, our spidey senses go up like, oh my goodness, well, what happened to all of that from the past? Because we know this is a established ophthalmology
right.
clinic.
Yep.
That we actually could glean from the report, which
Yep.
means what happened before August or September of 2019. And that's why I'm sweating. Like, there's that self-disclosure stuff that this report does go into, that you have to self-disclose and you have to do this within these many days. And, the OIG can look at you for these 6 years, et cetera, et cetera. But like you stated, you have to do a self-disclosure with a trusted healthcare attorney. Please, we do not ever advise that you can just do this on your own, cowboy style, because you could inadvertently do a lot more damage to yourself.
Yep.
Right? You need that attorney to help you do things in your best interest.
Yeah, I'm sure that biller didn't think anything out of the statement she made when she was talking to them. You know what I mean?
Right, probably.
And when they did come across it and stop it, they probably never thought anything about that either. Nobody ever took that step in their mind to say, so I'm thinking when I'm looking at this, not only the OIG is doing this report on them, but that's not going to be the end of it.
That's not the end of it.
Now they're going to come back about all of those injections that they got paid for, the lidocaine that they did not deserve. I'm supposing that that's going to be going back to them too. But once again, audits people. If a consultant had done an audit on that practice, they would have picked that up at the very first thing. And so it would have been stopped a long, long time ago and wouldn't have been kept going on. Somebody would have caught that and told them, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this. And would have suggested at the time, like when I find things like that, and I had to for one client where I found such a pattern that I did have to say, we need to contact a health attorney because we ended up having to do a 5-year look back because of what, they were doing. But it's better that you find it out, you say it, you fess up before they find it and come after you, because then it's different. Then you're getting a whole lot in attorneys and consultants and everything else involved. Whereas if you cut it off and do, oh, we're really sorry, we didn't know, then it's like an abuse. You didn't know. It's not a fraud thing that they're coming after you for, that you really should have known this. And this is intentional because, these are facts. These are things that are in there. You bypass it with the modifier 59. It didn't happen on accident. You had to put that on there for it to go.
Exactly. So, exactly. And we aren't privileged to the rest of the details of what the biller talked about, right? Because as a biller, what that modifier does to claims. Like, she knew exactly what it does to just push it through. So,
or she should have known.
She should have known. Regardless, it's just a shame, right? That you and I can see so much more, and this practice probably, has a lot more that it's going to be looked at closely.
I think
in
so.
the future. But in terms of, other types of practices and this type of space, right? And like I alluded to earlier about, we do have 2 eyes, right? And so when you want to try and distinguish something as being separate and significant, right? Let's move on to the other big bad boy modifier, 25. That's also involved in this situation, in this report. this is where something I would want to probably advise the provider to try and appeal, right? Because if documentation is saying, I'm going to be looking at the other eye, to see if it's atrophying, right? And that would be considered to be something separate and significant, right? In addition to that injection on the other eye.
Yep.
For either that extended ophthalmological examination or just the general eye E&M code, right? That would be warranted. But as you read through the report, it does say time and time again from the medical reviewer on the OIG side, they just didn't see that that would be necessary, that other exams would, show that nothing is going on with that right eyeball, etc. So when I read that, I was like, I wonder, because again, we don't have access to the actual documentation here. But in general, when ophthalmologists are looking at the other eye, it's simply to see if the disease has progressed, because that particular condition does have a way of progressing into both eyes. It's just a fact. So I thought that would be a great part where, and perhaps they do talk about it, that they agreed with everything the OIG said, but they would be taking certain claims to appeal, right? Yes. As that attorney says at the very end page of the report, that they agree, which I was very happy with. They agreed with everything that the OIG came back and said, except they will appeal on a few things. Yeah. And so hopefully those are the particular cases where they will make an appeal that, hey, I did need to take a look at that other eye, and make sure that it's in a safe situation. We don't need to progress treatment, etc. Right? Yeah. Or start treatment, right? So.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. And when they got to the section in the report for the evaluation management, which in the report starts on page 10, and they go through showing the billing pattern and things like that with the left eye, right eye thing that we were talking about. But on page 12, it says that for 21 of the 57 E&M services, the independent medical review contractor determined that the E&M services were for the purpose of deciding to treat the beneficiary's other eye with an intravitreal injection on a future date. And their claim was that for those E&M services, that is bundled into the service that they do at a future date. And that's definitely the ones I'm assuming that they're going to appeal, because I don't know how they could support that.
Yeah, exactly. See, that gives us pause. Exactly. It didn't read right. Yeah. I just didn't understand what they were trying to get at.
Which just goes to show you, as we were saying, just because the OIG reviewers do it, they're not perfect either. None of them are, right? So maybe they were making a point here, and really maybe they thought they had some kind of angle on it. I don't know. But, the provider said, and then the medical director from the clinic in their conversation back with them said expressly, he stated most of his patients have diseases in both eyes, and that an examination in both eyes is warranted for patients with macular degeneration. And he checks the other eye to ensure that the disease either isn't developing or has not developed. So either isn't starting or hasn't gotten worse. So they're kind of saying, well, but we really need to do that. It's kind of negligent if you think about it, right? To just ignore the other side.
Exactly.
So, and so they were like, okay, we disagree. So just because the OIG finds something, or just because a RAC auditor or the SMRC, just because you get results from somebody and they're saying that you're wrong, make sure somebody else is checking that stuff, because they're not always right either. So, and when
Absolutely.
you find things like that, I say wholeheartedly appeal those decisions. So that I think is a good point, that, and a lot of these things, because they're not focused on one practice, the nationwide things, they're kind of
Mhm.
like generalities where you don't really
Right.
see what happens, because they're talking about massive amounts of claims that they're looking at. Whereas with this one, it's on a specific issue, and it's relating to just that clinic. So you can kind of see a little bit more of the story, like what the biller said and what, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I think that's an interesting point out of this report too, is if you don't agree, that doesn't mean that's the end of it.
That's right. You have the right to appeal still. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point, that just because the OIG's reviewers have come back and disagreed with things or don't see things from the ophthalmologist point of view, the actual MD, right, who understands much better the disease process. I know I've seen documentation very loud and clear state that that is the rationale why they are looking at the ipsilateral eye, is to
Yep.
make sure there's no disease there, right? Because they know the condition itself is going to progress further and further, and that does include the other eye, right? So you have to make sure and not be negligent. I agree with your terminology there. That's spot on.
Yep.
If you just continue ignoring that eye because you're afraid of what the OIG will come back and say to you, like, that's not good medicine either, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Or, just think from that medical legal point that you just made, so, they don't do that eye, and then something happens in that eye. And,
Mhm.
well, you could have caught this a year ago if you would have been checking it. Now there's something else that ophthalmologists could be in hot water for, from the patient side of it, where maybe they're suing them for malpractice. So documentation is not just for getting paid. It's
It's
a
not.
communication
Mhm.
device for
Mhm.
practitioners and non-physician practitioners and other staff, to use, to see what's going on with the patient, to tell their story, to make sure other people know what it is if they have to go see somebody else. And it's a legal document. So that's why with my clients too, I always talk to them about when they have those patients that are non-compliant and they're
Mhm.
not taking their meds, and
Yeah.
I'm like, those things should all be documented, and you should be coding those non-compliance things, because what if they're non-compliant, something
Mhm.
bad happens, and now the family's all upset with you, saying that you didn't take care of them. How are you going to prove that? Well, you better be documenting that kind of stuff. So it's also a legal document that could protect the practice from
Yes.
a lot of different things other than
That's
just
right.
a payor audit.
That's right. That's well said. It's a legal document. Absolutely right. And that provider has to be protected, right? We have to make sure at all costs. Absolutely well said. Um, what other findings did we want to talk about this particular clinic? I know that other extended ophthalmoscopy also was similar, again, because it was utilized in the opposite eye, and they continued to deny it again, that another diagnostic service could show similar results, etc. That was the rationale from their
Yeah,
reviewer.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah.
again, we don't know what those other diagnostic services were because they only outlined this handful of CPT codes, and none of them included another diagnostic
No,
procedure.
no. And
So I'm
in
not
fact,
really
they
sure
don't even
what they
put
were alluding
CPT
to.
codes. Yeah, and this one they
Yeah.
didn't even put CPT codes. They just mentioned what it was.
They mentioned what it was. You and I know what the codes are,
Right.
but they were not talking about another one of those scans for diagnostic procedures in there. So I don't know what they were alluding to because it's not provided in their list of CPT codes in the charts that they do provide throughout the report. So, I don't really know, but
No.
in
No, the
general,
other,
yeah, sorry.
sorry, I was going to say, there's just, the other thing I thought, was interesting is they kept going back to the fact that they just flat out told them they don't have policies and procedures. So I mean, they just were clean about everything. They came clean about
Yeah.
everything they were
Yeah.
doing. So there was no, attempt to dodge anything or hide anything. They were just
No.
like, we didn't know and we didn't
Right.
know, which is why I think they didn't have a compliance program, because they
Agree.
probably didn't know that either. When you look at the report, it also talks about in the Appendix A on the audit scope on page 17, that they didn't review the clinic's overall internal control structure. So they're saying, we're just looking at the records. We limited our review to the records and then their internal control having to do with that. Like, well, why were you billing this with everything? Well, we didn't know. Well, do you have policies about that? No. So they didn't kind of make it any bigger than it was. They just concentrated on, the things related to what they said. And I think part of that is because they were so forthcoming. It wasn't like they were combative or they were nasty or they were mean. This wasn't, like something that was very adversarial. And so they were just like, we're just going to limit it to this stuff right here and, we'll be good. But yet they said, that they need to make sure that the clinic officials and the clinic billers have an understanding, of what's needed in having these written policies and procedures and things like that. And so in looking at the thing we were talking about, the audit was from records from 2019 to 2021.
Okay.
Which included field work performed at the clinic. So they actually did it at the clinic site.
At the clinic in Florida. Wow. Okay.
Maybe
On-site visit.
Maybe that was somebody on the East Coast upper, like in the middle of winter, we're just like, Florida might not sound
This is a good time to go to Florida. Right. I'm happy to go.
But, I think those are the big takeaways with the compliance program and looking at things. And I thought also it was interesting in this one, they did give the attorney's letter. They did show that the attorney for the center did say, yeah, we agree. We didn't know these things. We're doing them now. We're going to put it in place, but we're going to appeal some of these. So it was all, a very nice, smooth kind of process going on. But they had an attorney involved, which, obviously is something you definitely want to do if the OIG is kind of, coming up to your office and saying,
exactly, hey. Please. Yes. Trusted healthcare attorneys are a must in these very serious situations. And before we go, I wanted to make sure that you also highlight, I think it was Appendix B, the laundry list of other OIG reports on ophthalmology practices. The report, of course, from way back in 2005 on the modifier 59 is included in their appendix as well, because an ophthalmology case was involved in that. So yeah, you guys, this type of work has been going on for quite some time. These sort of misunderstanding or continued confusions on how to compliantly bill for these multiple services in addition to the injection procedures to the eye, right? Yep. There's at least 10 on that appendix, right? So this has been going on for a long time.
Check those NCCI edits, people. Make sure you've got a reason if you're bypassing some of them with a modifier. It has to be a valid reason, not just because you think you should be paid for it. If there's an NCCI edit that says you can't do this or you shouldn't be doing this together, don't just automatically slap a 59 on it and think, well, that gets it paid. Again, not about getting paid. You want to keep it. So there has to be a reason why that is considered significant and separately identifiable from that procedure that you're doing. And if you're doing it all the time on every one of them, there's probably something not right there. That's when you want to call somebody for advice on to see if you should be doing that.
That's right, Betty. That's well said. Absolutely. We have to do better We have to utilize all of the tools that are available to us and put them in our toolbox.
Yes.
Refresh ourselves reading that NCCI manual at least every quarter. I know I do.
Yep.
Every quarter, because things do change. They make their updates in the red ink on the online version, right? Literally, They make those updates very timely, and you have to just know what's going on. Because I say at the end of most episodes is change is constant in healthcare. We cannot just stick to the old NCCI manual from whenever it was first published, right? No, everything has changed. I know you and I talk about E&M stuff that's recently changed for NCCI. So it's just good to include this item as well, this OIG work plan report, especially if you are in the ophthalmology space as a specialist. Obviously, if you are a biller, a coder, an auditor, these are really, really good reports that you can take to your own practices to make sure that you're doing things compliantly and improve and stay compliant, and definitely develop your own compliance program. Please, we implore you. You should have one. And you should be self-auditing from month to month. Take a look under the hood from time to time and see what you're sending out the door and make sure it's compliant.
It's great advice, Sonal.
Yeah. So thanks so much, my friend. I hope everybody today enjoyed our session on this new report on ophthalmology specific to this one clinic in the state of Florida. And I look forward to the other reports that should be coming out sometime here in 2024 to conclude their overall look at these particular eye injections. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you so much, my friend. And I will see you once again next week for our next Compliance Capers.
Yes. Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Bye.